when you have as little hair as I do. Once in a while, you try to put it into a mohawk, and it doesn't really work that well. Hey Booktube, it's Kim at middle of the book march, and I don't know what I'm doing with my shirt. Hi, but I have a video for you today because I read a lot of online websites that are bookish related, and I watch a lot of Booktube, and something that keeps coming up for me are all the new releases coming out, and all of the new books and the new authors and all kinds of really positive things. So I thought I would do a video showing you some of my favorite debut novels. And I have a very big stack. I had to divide them into 2 stacks. They are so high. But these are fantastic debuts that I've read over the years. And I will very briefly tell you why they're my favorites and a little tiny bit about each of the plots, but not much. I have reviewed several of these books. Yeah. Not all of them, but the majority of them I have reviewed on my channel at one time or another. So let me show you some of my favorite debuts. Now, all that to say, there are thousands of incredible debut novels out there. But these are the ones I happen to read and love. These are all 5-star books, in my opinion. There may be one I put as a 4-star here and there, but they're all excellent books. So I'm going to stop yammering and show you what they are. Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. This was her debut. This one was published in 1811. It came right before Pride and Prejudice. And this is one of my favorite Austens, along with Pride and Prejudice. But this is the story of Marianne and Eleanor Dashwood, who are left penniless after their father dies, and they have to figure out how to live and what they are going to do. I love this book. It's one of my favorite movies of all time, but this is basically quintessential Austen. And as I've recently stated in one of my videos, I'm not a giant Austen fangirl, but this one and Pride and Prejudice are amazing novels. And this was her first, so... Another, one of my beloved novels, this is just so incredible. This is Adam Bede by George Eliot. This was her first novel. And there was a book that came before this one, Scenes of Clerical Life, but that's actually a collection of 3 novellas or short stories put into one volume. Adam Bede is her first full-length novel, and it was published in 1859. This is the book where Charles Dickens kind of realized this is not a male writer. George is not a man. He's got to be a woman. And Dickens was one of the first people to realize who George Eliot was. It's set in the English countryside. Adam Bede is a young carpenter. It's a love story. It's a community fiasco of sorts. It's about religion and estates and the wealthy and the poor. It's just a beautiful novel. It's one of my favorite Eliots, Middlemarch, Daniel Deronda, and I think Adam Bede. And in my opinion, Adam Bede is a great place to start with George Eliot, even though there's quite a bit of colloquial language. I'm surprised I spit that word out. Colloquial. Yep, that's it. Did you know that The Hobbit was Tolkien's debut novel? The Silmarillion comes before this chronologically. It's kind of the prequel. But this was the first novel he published in 1937. And I read this, I think, for the first time when I was 12. I've since read it a couple of times. I really want to reread the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy and this one, starting with this one. And I think I may embark on that towards the end of this year. So hint, hint, if anybody may be interested in that, stay tuned. It's not gonna happen early this year. So, but it's the story of Middle Earth and Bilbo Baggins, who is the first Hobbit we're introduced to. If you're not aware, this is such an incredible fantasy novel, and this set the stage and the tone for all fantasy novels after it. There have been so many adaptations and so many iterations of Tolkien's fantasy world. This is what started it all, in my opinion. There may have been fantasy novels before that. I don't know. I was too young to figure that out. Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. This is a fantastic novel. This was published in 1947. This is the commentary of the unnamed narrator, who is a black man coming from the South, moving to New York City in Harlem. And he is talking about, as a black man, being invisible. This is not about the disappearing man or the guy you can't see. This is about the unnamed black man who exists in a city that doesn't see him, who is looked on as disposable, invisible, not invaluable, but not valuable to society. And it's a tragic story, but it's important, and it's just so artistically written. A huge recommendation for this book. Ralph Ellison did write a few other things, but Juneteenth is another novel of his, but Invisible Man is his debut. One of the best debuts in fiction history is The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. There's been a lot of discussion. Jolene from Bookworm Adventure Girl and AJ from AJ Dunn Reads and Writes just finished The Bluest Eye in their Toni Morrison reading project for this year. And it's such an incredible, toxic coming-of-age story, abusive, damaging, violent, Piccolo Breedlove, who just wants to be pretty and believes in order to be pretty, she needs blue eyes and blonde hair and white skin. It's just a fantastic debut, Morrison's debut, published in 1970. And it's just, it's the perfect introduction to Toni Morrison's writing. Believe it or not, this is Gloria Naylor's debut novel. I'm reading Mama Day currently. This is The Women of Brewster Place, published in 1980. This is The Women of Brewster Place in 7 stories. It's seven stories, but it's all linked characters in the same city. It's just fantastic. And it's another book written by a Black author about a Black community and the interactions, the tragedies, the warmth. It's so good. I never saw the adaptation with Oprah in it, and I don't think I want to, but the book was incredible. Believe it or not, The Joy Luck Club is Amy Tan's debut novel. This was published in 1989. This is still being assigned in high schools for high school reading. This is the story about 4 Chinese immigrants who get together to play mahjong and eat incredible food. And their daughters are American-born daughters, I believe, because I read this so long ago. But they all kind of converge in the same group. And they learn each other's histories. They learn the history of their mothers, their parents, what they had to overcome. And it's just so good. And this is crying out for a reread for me. One of the hardest books ever to read is Bastard Out of Carolina by Dorothy Allison. This was published in 1992. I just reread this last year for the Barter Hordes book club, and it's so powerful. It's the story of a young girl named Bone, who again comes from a poor, abusive, neglectful family in the South Carolina. Bastard Out of Carolina. It's right in the title. But it is just heartbreaking and gut-wrenching. But it talks about family and what you do for each other. It is an explosive book talking about abuse and the level of poverty. But even the most poor families and how tightly they come together and stick with each other. Again, one of the best debuts ever is Zadie Smith's White Teeth. This was published in 2000. And it's just talking about, it's kind of one of the most witty, intelligent, quirky stories of friendship and converging families interracial marriage, talking about love and war and generations of friendship. And it's a fairly long book, but it is just so masterfully done, so artistic, and a smart story with incredible character development. And it's still, I read it years ago, but it's still so hard for me to think that this is a debut, because at the time I finished it, I thought it was the best books I had ever read. One of the best books I had ever read. My pile is going to topple right over. The Kite Runner by Khaled Hosseini. Again, I read this years ago. This was published in 2003. This was one of those debut novels I read in an article that he wrote, or he was interviewed, that he had this kind of on the back burner for 10 years and really wasn't going to publish it. And it kind of broke him, and his wife, I think, or his partner said, you have to get this book out there. You have to get this book published. This is the story of a young boy in Afghanistan and kite flying. Kite flying is a competition over there. It's the story of abuse, betrayal, violence, family, and so many of the books that I've just described have similar themes. Fathers and sons, and again, it's what these young children have to overcome in order to survive and thrive in their own lives. It's so beautiful and sad and sweeping, and I just love that book. One of my favorite mystery writers, kind of a mystery crime writer, and such a great book is Tana French's In the Woods. I love her writing style. I love the characters. It's a police partnership, and the characters carry through from book to book. So this is one of those series that is really best to read in order. But this is such a great story of a police partnership in Ireland. It's the Dublin Murder Squad, and they are investigating the murder. It looks like a ritualistic murder of a young girl, but one of the police partners has a dark secret, a family secret that comes to the surface in the process of this investigation. It is so good. Tana French writes some chunky mystery books, but it is such a great story and a great place to start with Tana French. She has a few standalones. Oh my gosh. A few standalone novels that are excellent. I read The Searcher with Britta Bowler last year, and for our Irish Women project, it was awesome. We loved it. But this is the first in her Dublin Murder Squad series. Madeline Miller's The Song of Achilles. This was published in 2012. Her book Circe I read first, which came a few years ago. It came out right as I started BookTube, and I read that one first, and I really loved it. And then I went back and got this one and loved this even more. It is the story of the warrior Achilles and his relationship with Patroclus. What was really the relationship with Patroclus? It's a story of war and a friendship too close to determine what their relationship is. This is her retelling of what she inserts as their story, and it's such a beautiful book. Highly recommend this. This one I wrote, this one I didn't write it. This one I gave 5 stars to, and Circe was a good upper 4-star for me. This one I've talked about several times, Descent by Tim Johnston. This was published in 2015. This is a family domestic thriller. This has some of the best writing I have ever read in a thriller novel. If you are a thriller fan, if you're a family mystery fan, buy and read this book. I actually checked it out from the library, and I took it back to the library and I bought myself a copy, and ironically I bought myself a used copy. That's a former library book, but this is mine. It's the story of a family with their teenage daughter is 18 as she's graduating high school, talking about going to college. She is a track star, and the marriage is starting to crumble, and they also have a young teenage boy. So the family of 4 decides to go on a trip to the mountains, and their daughter wants to go for an early morning run, so her brother gets on his bike and follows her, and she disappears. It is so well written. This is one of those books I did not want to leave. I wanted to read it from cover to cover. I can't recommend this enough for mystery thriller fans. It reads like a literary fiction novel. One of my favorite books last year was Himself by Jess Kidd, published in 2016. I loved this novel. This is her debut. It's a ghost story. It's a mystery. It's a coming home story, a prodigal son story set in the 70s. It is so brilliant and funny, and it's Jess Kidd. There's ghosts and there's dead beings and there's a little bit of magic and fantasy, but it's not all that. It's so fun. It was so fun to read. I love her writing. Absolutely love her writing. She is an Irish author, and I just loved it. It was an easy 5-star, surprising debut novel. I first read her book, Things in Jars, a few years back, and really loved her writing, and this was her second book of hers that I picked up. And I have a few more that I want to get to. This one is an interesting one. It's a debut novel, but also a one-book author, and I'm really hoping this author comes out with something else. This is Emily Ruskovich's Idaho. This was published in 2017. I can't say enough about how brilliant this novel is. It's the story of a marriage of a couple with two young girls, and they are kind of not in maybe the desert or kind of a rugged landscape in Idaho. And it's Anne and Wade, and they're kind of out taking a road trip, and something happens to one of their young daughters. And what does that do to their family? What is happening to Wade in that process, before and after? What did Anne do? But the writing is so incredible, so artistic. And this is, again, I can't say it enough, another debut that I couldn't believe was a debut. I've recommended this book to so many people, and I would love to see more people pick it up. It's just brilliant. What else? Okay, 3 more. Another one, The Illumination of Ursula Flight by Anna Marie Crowhurst. I think she's a Guardian staff writer. One of the most beautiful books I own. I've showed this several times. This is the story of Ursula Flight, and she is bound to be married off by her mother, if her mother has anything to say about it. But her father is the one that doesn't want to do that to her. He educates her, he encourages her to be involved and interested in astronomy and literature. And it's her mother that decides, I am getting you married and you are leaving this house. But what happens to Ursula along the way? Who does she really love? Who does she fall in love with? What happens after her marriage? And where does her life go? It is such an excellent book. She is a writer interested in theater. There's some interesting formatting in here with a play, and there's an example of, I can't find it off the top of my head, but the beginning of her will and testament. She shows a playbill from a theater production that she's involved in. It's just a wonderful book to read. It's funny, it's fun, it's interesting, it's traumatic, it's just excellent. 2 more. This one was published in 2018. This is The Mermaid and Mrs Hancock by Imogen Hermes Gower. I read this book. This is not just about a mermaid, people. There's so much here. This is written from the point of view of right before Victorian England, 1785, Edwardian, Georgian period, I don't remember. Regency, I don't remember. But it's not just about a mermaid. There's so much here that speaks to feminism, that speaks to the agency of women. There's some magical realism in here, but it grows till the end of the book. It's almost Dickensian in its story. Who is Mrs. Hancock? How does she become Mrs. Hancock? What is her involvement with a mermaid? It was so well written, and this author, another single book author, and I've been waiting, and I've been trying to look out for her name to see, is she going to come out with something again? I loved it. I loved this book. At first I thought that must be kind of a light read. It's not. It's almost like reading a Dickens novel, as I said. It's interesting, it's dynamic, it's surprising. I loved it, absolutely loved it. And the last one, no surprise to anybody that this is in my pile of excellent debut novels, Shaggy Bane by Douglas Stewart. Ange, this one's for you. This was such an excellent debut. This was another novel that I believe Stewart took up to 10 years to write and publish. It's just a book of heartache and hope and love. Shaggy, oh my gosh. It is, the way it's written is you see Shaggy in his present day and you go back in his memories and the snapshots of his life to find out how he got to where he is. The love, the desperate love and bond he has with his alcoholic, neglectful mother, his siblings, how they escape poverty in Scotland. What does Shaggy do to survive as a young boy coming of age in this environment? Oh, it is so good. It is so, so good. Makes you tear up. Some people have bawled. I don't usually bawl at books. Makes me very emotional. So much in there to relate to. It is just so powerful. So these are some excellent debut novels. Let me know if you've read any of them. Let me know if any of these sound like a good reread to you. As I said, I'm going to revisit the Lord of the Rings series. There's several in my pile that I would love to reread. I've already reread several of them. I've read Bastard Out of Carolina several times. I have read The Hobbit several times. I've read Sense and Sensibility a couple times. But yeah, there's some excellent books. There's no way out of this particular pile I could even pick a favorite. They're all that good. Let me know if you want any debut recommendations. Let me know if any of these topics sound good to you. And again, like I said, let me know if you've read any of them and what you think. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye, everybody.